This is Ayla Faye, here to talk to you about how to create a craft presentation. This one is created using QuickTime and PowerPoint. You can use the screen recorder and presentation software of your choice. Speaking of software, Screencast-O-Matic is a free downloadable software you can use. QuickTime usually comes downloaded onto your Mac. And I've also linked in the content area a link to a blog on the best screen recording software out there in 2020. So, next you need to select a craft topic. You may be like, craft? You mean like making art? Well, yes, craft of writing. So, your first step is to be specific. How to write poetry. Way too broad. On the other hand, details in poetry, that's pretty specific. Also, you want to choose the part in the textbook you're going to focus on. Notice how small this part is. It's just 2 pages long. And so, in The Palm of Your Hand by Steve Cohen, in chapter 2, he talks about the power of details. So, your topic is details in poetry. Actually, I'd prefer you come up with your own topic. This one's taken. Now, you want to share the best advice from that writer about that element of craft. So, when you're choosing poetic details, you want to create a mental image for your readers. You want to show events versus tell us about them. And you want your details to be concrete and specific. You also want them to be sensory, which means you want them to appeal to our senses, what we can see, hear, taste, and so on. Once you've shared the best advice, you would want to show how the advice works. On the left, you see a narrative description of the poem on the right. One day, my brother and I managed to stop a train by putting a false, not face, false person made out of different stuff on the railroad tracks. We watched the train come to a stop, and then some guy got out who was very angry. Power. No one we knew had ever stopped a train. Hardly daring to breathe, I waited, belly down with my brother in a dry ditch, watching through the green thickness of grass and willows, stuffed with crumpled newspapers. The shirt and pants looked real enough. Stretched out across the rails, I felt my heart beating against the cool ground, and the terrible long screech of the train's braking began. We had done it. Notice, both of them show the same event. Both of them describe the same event, but one tells, the one on the left, and the other shows. We are right there with these two people as they're waiting for the train to collide or stop against their dummy. Notice the sensory details. It's not just a ditch, it's a dry ditch. And the narrator feels her heart beating against the cool ground, and there's a terrible long screech. There's also a lot of wonderful sound qualities and a lot of specifics. It's grass and willows, stuffed and crumpled newspapers, which also shows the use of strong verbs. So we see the elements that Kiewit describes when creating good images that are concrete, specific, and sensory. We can see them played out in this poem, Power. Then you need to discuss how you'll use it in your own writing. So, a simple description: the worst date ever led to my wedding day. True story. I don't know about you, but I'd want to keep reading. But that's still telling versus showing. Think nuked Easter peep. Warped, sugary chick becomes expanding nuclear monster. Not first date material. But it ended, the two of us like chicks on a log, drenched, sugar coated, monstrous. So here You take your writing, you give an example of where you might start with that writing, and then you apply the advice of concrete, specific sensory detail, and your poem starts to come to life or to melt in your microwave, depending on what your poem is about. And now that would conclude a presentation for English 160. For the students who are in English 360, which is not just about creative writing, but specifically about style, how style works, and how you develop your own style. So it requires you to compare styles. First, in textbook advice, we know what the advice Coet gave about details. Well, Rooney, in the textbook Serious Daring, which is a textbook that 360 students are reading and 160 students aren't. But Rooney says, looks at how specifying precisely what we mean also increases the vividness of our writing. Don't just say tree, say hemlock. One of the things that saying hemlock does is it makes you have a much more specific image of what you're talking about. But it also raises issues of rarity, because how many hemlocks are there really? I don't know if I've even seen a hemlock. Also, sound quality, because let's face it, hemlock just sounds cool or dangerous, depending on how you look at it. It does make me want to see what a hemlock tree looks like. In any case, it also points out that it can give us a specific image. So once you've compared advice between two writers, you want to go on and look at how two poets address the same issue. Wonderfully enough, we have two poems about trees. One by a poet by the last name of Judah, and the other by a poet by the last name of Mullen. In Sleeping Trees, we have between what should and what should not be. Everything is liable to explode. Many times I was told, one who has no land has no sea. My father learned to fly in a dream. This is the story of a sycamore tree he used to climb when he was young to watch the rain. Judah uses a stream of consciousness, a fluid movement from one idea to the other, some of them very abstract, like who has no land has no sea. Some of them are very specific. The father used to climb a sycamore tree, very specific, when he was young and watch the rain. So we still get very specific ideas and vivid imagery, and a clear picture of things. Now let's move on to Mullen. Yes, I'm grounded, like all the little bushes attached to the earth at the ankles. Here we have much more straightforward, streamlined, distilled language. It still has a very clear image, but there's a lot less going on. And that's okay. Sometimes simple is better. And that simply is how to do a craft presentation in English 160 and English 360. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at alexandria.lafay@greenville.edu. Thank you for listening.